Guys, I know a lot of you. Hold on, let me get some music going. Let's get this music. I know a lot of you are really trying to like make it as commentators, and some of you think that I'm like kind of good at commentary. And if you look around my channel, you can find that I commentate a bunch of shit. I've commentated for like the local tournament scene here at Southern California. I've commentated at the the Summit Tournament Series, some of the Super Arcade tournaments, and I've also commentated for Outworld a couple of times. I commentate for S Tier occasionally. I jump on other people's streams whenever they need me to. There's always a lot of people looking for my services, so I've come to the conclusion that I'm actually kind of good at this shit. So I'm going to explain some of the basics. This is going to be a live thing, so if you're here in the chat, make sure if you have questions you can ask me. I'm going to check after, in between and all that. Because I know that there's a lot of things that maybe I'm not going to cover, because this is going to be kind of a basic guide. This is going to be a follow-up to my last commentary guide that I did like a year ago that like some of you found helpful, but some of you didn't. Before we get into it, I want to explain the basics. So let me pull out my basics for commentary. These are like, if there are 4 rules, these are the 4 rules you need to follow. If you do this and you know nothing else, you will be all right. You will be okay, okay? So the first one is during a match. Let me turn off this music, okay, so you can understand, right? First one, during the match, there should never be any kind of silence. You should be filling in everything. Now, I commentate by myself, and I commentate by myself for like 6 hours, so I'm in the habit of never stopping talking. But if you are not the type of person to be very quick with it, like if you're not a very fast person, then commentary is going to be like fucking hell for you, and you're just going to kind of sit there quietly. But you cannot have empty space, right? Because a lot of people, when they're watching matches and they're watching tournaments and they're watching esports, occasionally their attention will drift, right? And if there's a long period of silence or there's not a lot happening, like say it's the neutral and they're just kind of like jockeying for position, they're both walking back and forth, there's not really a lot going on, that's when it's important for you as the commentator to make it seem like a lot is going on. So if I have 2 people, right, that are just doing this, and it's like, okay, yeah, Cabal is walking back and forth, and he jumped back, and blah, blah, blah. Like, that's boring, right? When you're filling the silence, try and get into the mind of the player. If it's a down period in the match, try to think of what the player is thinking and then try to call that out, right? So you want to make sure that there's no silence, and that oftentimes gives you an opportunity to make reads that are like your reads, right? So if I'm getting in the mindset of my opponent and calling out, or not my opponent, but the player, and calling out what I think their next move is going to be, and then I end up being right, people start saying, oh man, you're a godlike commentator. Dude, how did you know? And it's like, well, I just kind of guessed because nothing was happening and I threw something out there. And if you're wrong, whatever, right? Like, if you're wrong, it doesn't matter. You're allowed to be wrong at making reads in commentary. That's where a lot of people get scared, because they don't want to make a read because they don't want to be wrong. But you're not playing. You're talking. You've got to tell the people stuff, right? You've got to say something that people will find exciting and interesting. So make the read. Keep talking. There should never be silence. But that brings me into the next one, right? The next important thing, so let me pull a notepad back up here, right? The next important thing is never, ever talk over the other guy. This is why multi-man commentary teams are very fucking hard, right? It's very, very hard to do. And it takes a level of chemistry and a level of rhythm to be able to pull that off. Let me see what chat is saying. Let's see. I use all my brain power to read and call out that they're going to jump in, and then I stand there and get kicked in the face while missing the AA. Yeah, but that doesn't matter when you're doing commentary. When you're playing, yeah, it sucks. You're like, oh, he's going to jump, and then you throw out an uppercut, and they didn't jump, and now you're just standing in the neutral looking like an idiot getting blown up. So, yes, that is true in a match that you're playing. But when I'm not playing and I'm making the read, right, like oh, yeah, he's going to jump. Kabalsak is bouncing back and forth, he's going to jump, and then he doesn't, and he just goes like, back 1-2 or whatever. Like, it doesn't, nobody cares because I'm not the one losing. That's why not having empty space is important. But the other one never talk over the other person. So when you're doing, especially like you guys see when you hear the podcast and things like get kind of rowdy, right? People disagree, they have arguments, and then they end up yelling and talking over each other. Like, having moments like that in a podcast is fine, but in a match, it ends up being distracting and very hard to follow the action. So you have to find your rhythm. If you're doing a multi-person commentary team, you have to find a rhythm where one person talks and then they stop talking and the other person knows to pick up and continue talking. And that's why multi-person commentary teams are always so good, is because you get that diversity of not hearing one voice the whole time. But again, you got to make sure not to talk over each other. That takes practice and timing. This is why when you see someone that commentates a lot, like I can jump on anybody's stream and I can just commentate with whoever. And I can pick up, right? I've done this enough to where when they stop talking, if I know that they finished their thought and I know that they finished their statement, I know to pick up right at the period, right? Right at the end of their sentence, I pick up with my chime in. And then if they're good, when I finish my sentence, they pick up. It gets kind of hard. There's like a little bit of mind reading going on there of knowing when they're going to stop talking. And sometimes if it's a new team, right, like I haven't worked with this guy or these two people haven't worked together, they have a hard time finding the rhythm. And there will be moments where it's like long gaps of silence or moments where there's, you know, them talking over each other. It happens. Don't like lose your shit over that. One thing with commentary that I find is when there's a hype moment, right? Somebody goes and fucking goes for a read and bam, down two, crushing blow, and they convert for a whole combo, and one person is getting excited and yelling and screaming, and the other person is being quiet and respectable because they're like, oh yeah, never talk over the other person. Both of you should be alternating. But in a hype moment, right, that's where the rules go out the window. People want that emotion, right? They want that emotional content. They want to feel as excited for the matches as if they're watching them live or, you know, or as if they're actually performing them. So when something happens excitingly in a match, right? When something happens excitingly in a match and you lose your shit and you start yelling, don't try and stifle that. Even though, like I said, with my second rule, let me pull that back up, right? Even though with my second rule, never talk over the other guy, there are exceptions to that rule. Again, like with never, there should never be any silence. There are exceptions to this rule. They're just as infrequent, right? This one, right, is a little more lenient, right? You can talk over the other guy in moments of emotional impact to highlight the emotional impact in the match. Very, very important. It takes a lot of experience and just kind of like game sense to know when those impactful moments are happening and to capitalize. But when you're a commentator and you call that big play and it makes that big comeback or that big win, and you called it in real time as it happened, and you and your co-commentator are both yelling and having a good time and losing your shit over how exciting the match is, that's going to translate. But the thing is, you want the up and down. You want the roller coaster. You want to actually have down periods, not quiet periods, but down periods where you're talking a little lower and you're alternating with your commentating partner and you're going back and forth, right, to build up. And then when those hype moments happen, all the rules are out of the window. Go crazy. So don't think of that as a hard and fast rule. Let me see what Chad is saying. What's up, Crenshaw? What's up, Mills? I'm doing a little breakdown, a live interactive breakdown on how to commentate fighting games. Just some basic shit. So if you have any questions, make sure to ask me while we're going. Otherwise, I'm going to go to the third important rule. Know what you're talking about. Mas importante. This is probably one of the most important things to a commentator. All of these four things are like the most important things. But this one, if you don't know what you're talking about, then you're going to be confused for most of the match. And then it's going to affect the other ones, right? So let me pull up the display capture. These rules, they kind of work amongst each other, right? If you don't know what you're talking about, you're going to be thinking about what you're talking about a lot, which means you're going to be probably silent. And when you do think of what you're going to say, right, chances are the other guy's already saying something and you're going to chime in because you just got your thought and you don't want to lose it, and now you're talking over the other guy. So if you know what you're talking about and you know the flow of a match, you understand the neutral, you know, understand how to call that stuff out, you'll sit there and say, he got an uppercut. And then that's the end of your statement. And then your partner should know, okay, and then he's going to follow up on Oki with this and this and this, right? And then, okay, that Oki didn't work. All right, now we're back in the nooch. Now I'm going to say what I'm going to say. You see how there's back and forth there? If I know what I'm talking about and they know what they're talking about and we can play off each other is even better, right? Okay, I'm going to talk. Player one hit an uppercut. The other commentator is like, okay, he's going to go for Oki. He's been trying to grab. And then now his statement is over. Oh, look, he went to fucking neutral duck the grab on Oki and got hit with an uppercut himself. Then the other guy talks, right? But if we don't know what we're talking about and can't call out those situations of like, okay, he went for Oki, he went for wake up, blah, 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 blah. And don't worry about explaining shit. If chat asks you to explain shit, then of course explain shit. But for the most part, you need to understand that your viewers also know what you're talking about. A lot of people that watch esports and fighting games specifically, yeah, there's a lot of new people and they will acclimate themselves eventually. But for the most part, you don't want to baby your stream or your channel by assuming that people don't know what the fuck you're saying, right? So if you use words like Oki and neutral and stuff like that, just go with it. After the match, if chat has a question, answer the question, obviously. But during the match, you want to keep things focused on the action and you want to keep things going towards the conclusion of the match. And you want, part of what knowing what you're talking about is being able to find something on the screen, see that it's happening, and then explain that to the viewer, right? You have to know what's happening for any of that to work, right? I have to look. And this is the easiest part of commentary. You look on screen, you see something happening. You know what that something is. You just say it. He went for a sweep. That's it. If you are new to commentary and a little shy, just say what happened on screen. Okay, he did a 1-1 combo. And then after that, fill in the gaps, right? Once you get, especially if you're doing it with a teammate, maybe add another sentence. Okay, he did 1-1 combo. He wanted to convert that for max damage, but he dropped, so he cashed out at 175 instead of 300. Now he has to eat this wake up. And then your partner would say something. And all I did right there, was I called out what he did because I knew what he was doing, right? He was doing a combo. I knew that he didn't do the combo correctly, so I said that. All I did was he dropped the combo, right? I knew it wasn't going correctly. I gave some context to the audience. This is how much damage he did. This is how much damage he could have done, so you understand, you watching, understand how much he fucked up, right? And now I'm explaining the situation that he finds himself in. His opponent is waking up. Wake up in Mortal Kombat 11 is scary because they have up 3 and roll and all of that. So you have to back off in the neutral, and you're now at disadvantage. So now the audience knows that from one situation to one situation to one situation, I've called out 3 situations that I knew what was going on, and all I did was explain what was going on, and then I gave maybe a little bit of context, right? A little bit of opinion work to give the viewer context for what's going on. And then if I was working with another commentator, I would stop, and then they would pick up from there. And again, that's the chemistry, right? They have to know when I've stopped and all of that. And you can often discuss that with your co-commentator beforehand. So make sure you do that. The last important thing, the last important thing, and this is just a basic guide to commentary. I can go into other detail in a future video. But clarity, más importante, más importante. If people cannot understand what you are saying, then you are shit. Like, you are, like, whoever's paying you to commentate is like, they may as well just flush their money down the toilet. You have to speak clearly, okay? You have to enunciate. You cannot mumble into your mic. You have to speak loud and confident. If that means that you're going to spend a lot of time screaming like I do, then that means you're going to spend a lot of time screaming, right? But if you're doing commentary and your enunciation is bad and you're kind of mumbling, then no one's going to be entertained. Nobody wants to watch that. That's just stream shit in general. But I see too many people that maybe just they're like, and then he goes for a uppercut, and then he's got, and then he's gonna go for a low, and then into back four three, 4, and then in the ice ball, and then right. Nobody wants to hear that shit. It's like, what the fuck, back, what, and why? right? The audience, you're explaining the match to the audience, right? That's your job as the commentator. And if the audience doesn't understand what you're explaining, then do you really deserve that job? And I know a lot of people are like, well, English isn't my first language. You can have an accent and still commentate and still speak clearly and enunciate and be knowledgeable and entertain your audience. You can absolutely do it. I see people with accents do commentary all the fucking time, even if it's not their language. As long as you can speak clearly and that your audience can understand what you are saying, then you're fine. You can have as thick of an accent as you want. Now, for some of where I figured all this out, a lot of it was from just commentating a lot on my own. But my inspiration, for those of you that want to know it and we'll go back and check it out, my inspiration is my favorite commentary duo or trio, which is actually from professional wrestling. It was the WCW commentary team of Mike Tenay, Bobby the Brain Heenan, and Dusty Rhodes, right? Those three together, and this is why they worked. Mike Tenay was the play-by-play guy, right? He knew, I know more about wrestling. This motherfucker is like really leaf blowing in my shit. Hey, I'm recording, asshole. Yeah, no, take your fucking time. It's fucking Wednesday. Anyways, what was I talking about? Mike Tenay. Mike Tenay did the play-by-play, right? He knows everything, every wrestling move. You're like, yo, that's a springboard, tope, suicida, plancha into a swanton to the apron. And you're like, what the fuck was all of that? That's like Mexican words, right? So Mike Tenay would call the play-by-play, and he was like the nerdy kind of like, if he were a fighting game player, he'd know all the frame data. He'd be like, that's +4, and at +4, he's got this follow-up, blah, 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 right? Then you have Bobby the Brain Heenan. He's the heel color commentator, right? He talks jokes and talks shit about the good guys and cheers on the bad guys. And then you had Dusty Rhodes, which is like the yin to Bobby Heenan's yang. He cheered for the good guys, talked shit about the bad guys. But those two would constantly back and forth and bicker, and it would be funny and it would add humor to it. And that's why the three of them as a team worked. And so when I commentate, I try to be all three of them at once. I try to call out all the technical shit, right? And then I try to make fun of one guy and cheer on the other guy. And then I try to make fun of the other guy and cheer on the other guy as well. And if I had a partner, I could coordinate with that and what have you. But when I commentate, I try to be all three of those characters at once. So if you kind of want to do how I do it, go back and watch old WCW, right? Just any episode of Nitro or Saturday Night that had Mike Tenay, Bobby the Brain Heenan, and Dusty Rhodes. See how those three work together, and that's pretty much what I try to do as a one-man team. But that's my little breakdown on commentary. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, make sure to fucking, I don't know, maybe keep them to yourself. Yeah. Nobody fucking cares about what you've got to say. They care about what I got to say. I'm the commentator, right? But if you have to say something, you can leave a comment and like, share, subscribe. I don't know. I have a fucking Patreon. Give me your fucking money. Like, that's it, right? Just pay me.